Hello. Well, another example of bias at the BBC, as if you needed another example to know that the BBC have been biased for quite some time. This from Newsnight.
Some of the events of that day are uncontested. As Congress met to formalise Biden's election victory, President Trump addressed a large rally of his supporters in central Washington, D.C.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
I think it's worth bearing in mind that the person you're going to hear from next, Mick Mulvaney, was a former White House Chief of Staff who was also ultimately a very fierce critic of Donald Trump, and even he is calling out the Newsnight, shall we say, lack of transparency in terms of its editing processes.
As you were a loyal aide, you had been Chief of Staff to Donald Trump. But Donald Trump galvanised and encouraged that crowd and stoked that crowd. And I wonder if you actually think that he actually believes in democracy.
And then Mulvaney replies with this.
A bunch of different questions there. Your video, and I'm no apologist for the president on this.
No, I'm not suggesting you are. I'm not suggesting you are. But what I'm saying is that your
video actually spliced together the presentation. He said we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members, and then it actually goes on to say, in some of them we might not be able to. And that line about it, we fight and fight like hell, is actually later in the speech, and yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts. The young woman from BuzzFeed is absolutely right. It was a violent attack, yet there were people, and there's video of people walking peacefully through the Capitol building. If we're going to have a debate about what this was and prevent it from happening again, I think part of that is to make sure that we are straightforward in our presentation.
So once again, a familiar pattern. A video spliced to make it look as if Donald Trump was inciting certain things. Now, Donald Trump is far from a perfect figure. Of course, he does things that are questionable. Of course, he does things that are wrong. That isn't the point here. The point here is that once more, we can see a trusted, or should that be once trusted, news organisation pushing an agenda, pushing an anti-Trump agenda. And okay, you can have an agenda, but you've got to be overt about it. And you try to be covert. Of course, if you've been paying attention to the BBC, you would know that they were very much anti-Trump. You could tell because when Joe Biden was stumbling about on stage at points in time, having no idea what he was doing or what he was meant to be doing next, almost nothing was said about it. It was just, oh well, we'll let that go. And that's a sign, in my opinion, of extreme bias. But that's not all. Yesterday, I did a little live video on YouTube and I talked about who might replace Keir Starmer. And of course, one of the people that I mentioned was Wes Streeting, who's been in the news. But listen to what this Daily Tea podcast person says about Wes Streeting.
So right-wingers think he's great because they are under the impression he's right-wing. I think he is in Labour terms. He is a Blairite, basically. He's a old progress kind of graduate. Then there's the view that, he's a brilliant politician because he's good at changing his mind and being chameleon-like. Well, I don't find that a very attractive quality in someone. And I think one reason why he seems very good is because our bar on politicians being effective communicators is so low.
Yes.
That when he comes out and says, well, it reminds me of this thing that my researchers watched and told me all you people at home watched, so I'm going to mention it too and sound normal.
Didn't say it like that, though.
No, but he did. No, he did. Okay. Wes Streeting. I'm going to work. I'm going to work on a Wes Streeting impersonation. I've known him for 20 years. I was at university with him, right? He is a classic example of a generation of politicians who are dead behind the eyes. They just have this stare. He just does this stare. And he'll just say something in this monotone like that. And actually, Tim Stanley, I think I find you're wrong, because I watched that programme and I did enjoy it. And all the commentators are so used to the low standard of politics, they go, that's amazing, because in the course of that sentence, he didn't, I don't know, come out as a communist or shoot someone in the audience.
So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us, I think, with the harsh truth. In terms of a replacement for Keir Starmer, there's not a lot of quality to choose from. And maybe the best we can hope for is a bit better than Keir Starmer. But ultimately, it would seem that we are going to need a general election sooner rather than later.